Good morning. We are starting from scratch with the fire today. I was all busy this morning taking care of other stuff. Didn't get it going. But then this is 10 in the morning, so this is earlier than usual. So I guess it all kind of balances out. It's going to be an interesting day for the coding today, I tell you. I'm not sure how this is going to go. Other than I know I'm going to do my best, whatever it is. So there's that. Well, the numbers of people are still very scarce. I'm looking at a situation that threatens my housing, and I might get a phone call, which may or may not be some form of relief. And the whole situation may or may not be as bad as I think. I don't know, so I'm very distracted. Not too distracted to set fire to pieces of wood, though, and that is a handy thing. Sometimes the dictates of reality come in handy. You end up in a situation where it's like, well, what do I have to do right now? Well, I can name you a bunch of things that I have to do coding-wise. In fact, as soon as I switch over to the programming computer, you can see all the stuff that I'm working on, and I'll even talk about an idea that I had this morning. But while I have not yet done that, my attention is somewhat taken up by it's cold and I need to set these pieces of wood on fire in order to get warm. It's not as cold as it might be. That fuel oil tank thing that I had to deal with, and that is such a luxury kind of problem to have. I remain firmly aware of that. Worst comes to worst, me having replaced that fuel oil tank means if I lose my house, I'll get more for it. And there's that. If not, I won't have any terrifying fuel oil leaks in upcoming years. And there's that. So that's cool. It reminds me that I need to get busy recording my drums while I still have a way of doing that. But the programming thing that I had in mind had nothing to do with drums. I was exploring ideas around using my Bezier filters to do oversampling. I'm not sure that's really a thing. It might be, but I'm not sure that getting this piece of paper on fire is a thing, so I've got to make another. But sometimes that's the way things go. And I have to acknowledge that. Like, I would rather not be an absolute terror all the time. I would rather not be afraid everything in my life is falling apart. But on days when I don't get that luxury and everything seems bad, sometimes those are the days I get a good idea. And the idea is like banking worth for future use. And I do respect that. Like the reason this housing being threatened thing, and again, I could be just reading too much into stuff. The reason that gets to me is I was kind of raised to believe that if you did not fend for yourself and do all of the, like, growing up in the early 70s, it was an assumption that, like, there was no such thing as all the stuff we know about today. There was no such thing as autism. There was no such thing as transgenderism or any of that stuff for the most part. But you were expected to get out there, get a job, do your regular stuff, and then the world would be there to support you as you did. This turned out not to be true. But I was raised to believe that it was. So I was raised to believe that if I could not survive on my own fending for myself, I didn't deserve to. And when I start looking at challenges, that's what comes up for me. I don't think this is that may be something more to my generation than modern generations, honestly. Gen X was just following the boomers, and it was assumed, like, if you weren't making it, it was your fault. I don't think people these days really have that feeling as much, which is good for them. You're not wrong about that, but that ends up being one of the things that, ooh, look, I've got ash on me. That ends up being one of the things that I got to carry. And again, like I said, that ended up, the pressure of that produces stuff. Like if I went into the studio and tried to make a song, that might produce a good song. I don't tend to make songs for that. I tend to make songs when I'm dating somebody. And it's been years for that, so oof. But as far as making a good plugin, sometimes that's where that stuff comes from. So today we're going to be exploring, firstly, that Dotoro plugin. I started tinkering with it a little bit more because what I want to do is put together a section that's entirely in comments, where if you uncommented it, you'd get the textbook Dotoro filter. Because what I'm doing with it is different. And I'm going to put it out like that. And very simple too. But I also want to make available what the textbook filter was, because it's such an elegant little thing. It's similarly to where in the biquad filters, in some of the early versions of my biquad filters, I sort of made available the textbook language for how you did that before going off and doing my own thing with it. I'm pretty sure I have something else on my desktop of the coding computer. And there's some work I need to do on 2-tape 9. And that's going to be interesting. I could see doing that. Might even be worth doing it from tape 9. If I didn't want to get so heavily into head bump. Because from tape was always the one without head bump. And it's going to be extra hours today. I'm going to go extra hard, although I'm going to have to take like bathroom breaks and stuff. Can't get around that. I'm getting too old to skip that kind of thing. And maybe also talking about, like probably if I'm talking about other things I need to do that while making the fire go. Fireside chats, hey. Because I need to focus in on the coding when I actually switch over to that. And again, if my phone rings in my pocket, it might be good news, it might be terrible news. Probably if it doesn't ring, that's worse. But if it does ring, it might be good news, at least if I have a chance of like fixing my situation a little bit. So I'll go offline, or at least go on pause if that happens. And if it doesn't, I will let the tension of that power my coding, and I'll be thinking of further things. I spent the morning on like Blue Sky and Substack, which is very interesting. Substack got taken over by liberals and leftists, so it is no longer what it used to be. Now it's just a giant ass platform, much like Patreon is. In fact, that's the reason I started posting things there and paying any attention to it, is because it's now a larger company than Patreon is, and I depend on Patreon to live. So if something happens bad with that, I'll maybe want to have a foothold in something else. But it's interesting to see what it's turned into, because what you can do is treat it the way you have to treat YouTube. And YouTube is giving me fits these days too. YouTube is doing a thing where I ended up on a slightly updated version of Chromium, but Google doesn't let you run uBlock anymore. on Chromium, and they're struggling to make one that works on regular Chrome. But I don't want regular Chrome because regular Chrome changes stuff out from under you, and that makes me crazy. And so they're changing the Google subscriptions page out from under me as well. And then different things show up, and there's like a recommended or stuff that you probably should have paid attention to getting in the way. And this is the subscriptions page, and still, it's doing it. And then it's also showing me shorts. I had uBlock blocking the shorts section of the subscriptions page for me, so I didn't have to see it. So much for that. So basically, if you go to just YouTube/feeds/ with nothing else, it gives you a blank page. And there's a little sidebar where you can click on subscriptions and get to that. So my bookmark now goes to YouTube, the blank page. And that also reminds me, like, if maybe I don't want to be looking at YouTube, it's a good way to remind myself, hey, maybe don't do this. And as far as the recommendation sidebar, the way you handle that in YouTube is you spank it. When it starts showing you stuff that is obviously just manipulative nonsense, and it's YouTube trying to mess with you algorithmically, what you do is you say, no, don't show me this channel ever again. And whether or not you give them a reason is kind of a moot point. But saying, nope, never show me that channel again is not bad as far as steering your recommendations to where it ends up showing you just all the stuff that you used to watch. Meaning that you can go back and watch stuff that was good. And I lean on that quite a lot. So my YouTube recommendation sidebar is not completely appalling. Because anytime it shows up with something that's obviously wretched, I just go, nope, never show me that channel. And it works fairly well. Turns out you can do something like that on Substack. Substack, you don't actually, when I subscribe to anything, it spams my email like crazy. So I just never subscribe to anything. And there's a feed, and you can kind of scroll it, and it just comes up with random stuff based on things you've already looked at. It's very much the algorithmic thing. But there is also the chance of going, oh, hi, you're from old Substack. I recognize your name. You're one of those people that were talked about and people wanted to bully Substack into deplatforming. And I recognize that name. And there you are, being ingratiating, and I know who you are. So what you do is you go, nope, you hit the little X box and you close that off. And you can give it a reason. You could say political, for instance. I think that's legitimate. I've been just entirely going, close the thing, and either don't give them a reason or give them not interested. I don't want to give them a bunch of political. I want to give them a bunch of, that looks boring, that looks dumb, that looks boring. Don't bother with these people. They must not be very interesting. And in that way, I'm kind of like poking their algorithm. But I'm also not putting too much weight into people who, the way Substack works, they think that you have a right to express your opinion no matter how crazy it is. And that is an opinion too. It's an opinion to have a platform where you can, post the nuclear secrets or whatever. And I don't know, I don't own that platform, so it ain't my business. But I'm not above poking it and using the algorithm. And I also poke it to be like not interesting when it is obviously some AI hypester going bonkers. They say that LinkedIn is like that all the way now. That LinkedIn is completely useless. There's nothing there but just AI nonsense written by AI and read only by other AIs. One of the things that I'm doing on Substack is I'm writing stuff with the fixed intention of having some of the AI readers ingest it and build it into their thinking as something that somebody else has thought. Because I have some ideas around the genetic algorithm and concepts of what AI as intelligence would have to mean if it was able to rise above just stochastic parrot. And I'm able to frame that in a way that is appealing to people who are in that sort of maybe naive section of the field. I'm hoping it catches on. And as such, I'll respond to other Substack things like that. I have a habit also of, when I post the word Substack on Substack, I capitalize sub but don't capitalize stack on purpose. People are always dual capitalizing Airwindows, and I try to be like, yeah, I don't actually have a trademark to the word Windows, so I leave that uncapitalized. Please do so. But on Substack, basically what I'm doing is just not respecting their branding. They'll let you do completely uncapitalized, but they do not like you capitalizing only the initial S. So I do it anyway, just because I'm like, from your past behavior, I don't think I have to extend that much respect to you. We'll see how this goes. So I always get the little red underline thing, you're spelling that wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm doing it for my own amusement. It doesn't harm anybody. And that's where I've been with that. That's what I was doing this morning, while also dealing with the housing thing. Honestly, some of the choices that I have made with regard to the fuel oil tank thing and stuff like that, and last year painting the house and stuff like that, have hopefully led to a place where, like, my range of possible options going forwards, in the event that anything startling changes, that there is some security to them, so we'll see. And if not, well, we'll also see. I'll probably be live streaming anyhow, because everybody's going to be able to live stream these days. And I'm going to throw another log on this fire, kick in the damper, because I do like having the catalyst in there. I love the wood stove because that is renewable. Wood burning is renewable, same with like the pellet stoves and things. But using a modern one like this is, and then using the catalyst, means that it is efficient, but it is also polluting less than an old-fashioned wood stove, and I like that. It's much better than my oil stove. My oil stove is not very good about polluting at all, so I prefer not to use as much of it. And let me do those things and get over to where I can see chat. And also, I should make a little chat screen sitting here so that I can see what people say. Then we can have entire fireside chats. But I'll move over to where I can see chat, and we can kick in, unless people have like intense questions to ask me, I can kick in on the actual coding, which is going to be bringing the Totoro thing up to speed so that there is a working textbook version of it to be had. And then bringing in the one line. I also want to measure it on white noise. I want to see what my version actually does, because I know what it sounds like, and I know why it's sounding the way that it sounds. I have the low pass, and I'm subtracting a saturated version of the band pass, and it weirdly still sounds like the same thing, but it's interacting with the way the crossover hits. And I want to see whether it does weird, like, notches and boosts and things on just the overall frequency response. Because either this is a normal thing to do, or there's a reason why people haven't done it before. And if there's a reason why people haven't done it before, well, I'm all the happier, because I'm doing it now, and man, it sounds awesome. But if there's a weird incongruity with it, and it does a strange thing, then I'm interested to know what that is. Otherwise, somebody will find it out and tell me. So, let's see. This is not a very big log. Oh, whatever. It's not all that cold in here anyhow, so that's fine. Fan going over to my coffee and my chat. A little bit of commentary on Substack and stuff. Here I am. Oh, I have a Elmira Labs pin today. This is from when I got the, what do they call it, Scrooge. I bought the Scrooge as a kit and soldered it together. And as is sometimes the case, it comes with
tchotchkes and goofy little stuff, which is always fun. I bought an Analog Man pedal once, a bunch of years ago, and it came with a foam like soda or beer holder, one of those foam little things with Analog Man on it. That was quite funny. And of course, if you buy things, I think it's if you buy things with either Perfect Circuit or Sweetwater, and they throw candy in the boxes like crazy. And yeah, the Elmira Labs, they give you a little pin, and this is their logo for Scrooge, and there's also some form of drone synth that they make. And I enjoy them immensely, but I also enjoy this. This is a mood. Their logo here, definitely mood. And yeah, let's switch over to Coding Stream. And as far as the chat is concerned, yeah, the way the housing issue works is like this. I will tell you the full truth of it all. I come out of being homeless. It's a good decade or so since then. Decades, actually. It's been like probably about 30 years. It's been probably about 30 years since I was homeless. But when I was homeless, I got on Social Security Disability, and I got on Section 8. So I had a Section 8 voucher, which they're hard to get. And then I did a thing called PASS Plan, which is Plan for Achieving Self-Support, which got me to Airwindows, which was originally going to be a recording studio, and only became plugins when the recording studio failed. And the PASS Plan is a thing where you can try to do stuff to earn money and write up a business plan, which I did with a local group called SEVCA, it's Southeastern Vermont Community Action, or something like that. I just hooked up with basically, these days people would call them all libs. I hooked up with all the libs who were building like social services and things. And since my homelessness was not because I was beating people up or drunk or whatever, but because I had autism and had just gone into recovery and stopped using drugs, I didn't fit the match as far as what people who were homeless normally looked and acted like. And so people ran around trying to get me services. And that's when I found out that I had autism, enough autism to choke a horse. And that is what got me into a situation where I could, thanks Grisha, and you know what? I have something to show you today. I'm going to show you the Totoro thing, which is going to become a part of what Donut will be. So I have something for you today. I have made progress in your direction. And Section 8 is a voucher program that's extremely difficult to get on because there's very little of it out there. And it's for low-income people to be able to have housing. The very first thing, before even that point, when I became homeless and then got on disability, I got into a local, a thing that they were starting in Brattleboro. And it was called Shelter Plus Care. The idea was, can we get people off the streets by getting them therapy, getting them housed, and figuring out if we can make some progress towards finding out why it is that they were homeless in the first place. And I was like the first of many people into that program. I was showing up at the homeless shelter right when they were trying to get this going. And there I was, undiagnosed with severe autism and not responding in the way that people normally thought. So I was like poster child for what a program like that would be about. And like the first therapist that I had through this program was the one who was like, hey, here's some books on autism by autistic people. Do you relate to this at all? And I was like, oh my God, it me. And there was the process of getting housed, getting a cheap apartment over the Shinla restaurant in Brattleboro. Shinla is still there, by the way. It's 30 years later. And ending up being able to be secure and like food secure, and gradually able even to do things like get my first computer, which was a Mac Performa 575. That's 30 megahertz 68040. That's how old me getting involved in stuff. That's where the album Dragons comes from, by the way. Is Dragons is hardware synthesizers, all of which were just kind of cobbled together over the years. And because before I became homeless, I had already been heavy into music. I thought that was going to be the whole thing. So I had like this old synth and that old thing and so on and so forth. I had a Koiji Mega synth. There were things that I had since when I was a kid living in my parents' house. And I brought a bunch of that stuff along with me and had a friend who was a drummer in a band that I was mixing sound for around that time. And his mom let me keep a bunch of my stuff in her basement when I became homeless, so I didn't lose absolutely everything. And I ended up being able to get on the Section 8 program, and they ended up having a system. At one point, they were very, very pumped about the idea of like, let's use Section 8 to try to get people into affordable houses. And I was moving in the direction of my first marriage. Only, honestly, I don't have a second marriage. I have had engagements with people, not many, and there's only one that was very serious, and that emotionally acted kind of like a marriage, but there were problems. But the first one I had chosen strangely, but it was somebody who badly wanted us to find a place to live that wasn't just more apartments. So we jumped on this thing as hard as possible, and I'm running with trying to do the PASS program and making something, all of that kind of stuff that makes you look really good to social services people. And it was authentic, but it was also what I was doing. And I went through a horrific situation trying to get into places where I could not, like, any place that we tried to get had to be, one, affordable, but also it had to pass the standards for rural development, because they were setting up the loan under this complicated conjunction of programs, and Vermont State Housing Authority, who were also involved in this. So it had to pass them as well. And then it also had to pass Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, because they were buying the land out from under the house in exchange for helping with money up front. Because that's the kind of thing. And it wasn't even Wyndham and Windsor. It was Rockingham Area Community Land Trust, which got taken over by Wyndham and Windsor. And eventually, after multiple failed attempts, it worked. And that's where I am now. The marriage fell apart, and I ended up paying off, taking out another loan and paying off in cash the entire home equity that my ex-wife was entitled to in the house. And then being the sole owner, all the paperwork taken care of and everything. And have been there ever since. And that's what I'm looking at right now, because it is still a Section 8 situation. And as such, I have to do paperwork, and I'm not getting the paperwork in the mail. And there's a deadline, and I have to have the paperwork filled out in order to even be able to enter into the question of, like, how do things stand this year? Is your program still happening this year? Are we still doing all this year? Do you still value what you're doing with this? And, I'm supplying my taxes, and they've traditionally wanted my taxes to be done really early so that they can do their paperwork and stuff. And this year I am not seeing any hint of that at all, and that scares the heck out of me. And I guess the worst case scenario is like, oh yeah, we're retroactively taking all of this away. Please cough up $650 million. And it's not going to be literally that, but it's the uncertainty of it is rough. And so today what I'm going to be doing, as you see on the desktop here, is coding things to kind of get my mind off it, because I don't have any resolution to it. If my phone rings, it'll be because I'm talking to somebody at Vermont State Housing Authority who may be able to let me go drive somewhere or send out a representative bringing a copy of this form. I still don't know why I'm suddenly not able to get mail that they send. Technically, I don't even know whether they're sending the mail at all or whether they're just saying that they're sending it, knowing that I won't be able to fill it out and return it to meet the deadline if it hasn't actually been sent. But I don't know that because that's wildly hypothetical. It's just me trying to figure out, like, why can this even be happening when it's so different from every previous year? I also have no reason to believe that Vermont State Housing Authority has been taken over by Doge or something. I'm told the person there is not some new Doge person with broccoli hair, but is instead somebody who's worked there for years. And I see no reason to disbelieve that. But, everything's very shaky. And the thing that I do have is, like, one, my wood stove fire, keeping me warm. I have my cup of coffee, and I'm going to make another one around noon. And I have my coding. And I'm able to think up new stuff. So, Grisha, you were the last person to say anything in chat. So I told you I would show you something. Let's see about that. We know this little piece of audio, but did you know I could do this? And I think this is still hooked up. I don't believe I would have replaced it. I'm recoding it, but not to the point of having replaced this bit. Here's a filter. So maybe I can build this into a compressor thing. But hey, there's more. This filter gets resonance. In fact, it gets lots of resonance. One of the things I'm thinking of is using this capacity for resonance to do, like, essentially a formant filter. I've got some information on formants where I should be able to turn this behavior into, like, Dalai Lama, effectively. Not really, but the same kind of thing where you'd be able to do vocal sounds and indeed fool with the degree of resonance that they have. Why do people like to boost the 10K frequency so much? Because it is brightness that is still basically within the range of audibility. It gives you the sort of up-closeness sound on many, many things. If you boost it on, for instance, guitars, it makes them blend with hi-hats and cymbals. It also sounds good on cymbals. It also sounds good on sibilants. It sounds good on vocal fry. And it's not so high that you can't actually hear it. It's like bordering ASMR without quite being it. And that would be why people like to boost the 10K frequency so much, is that's about as close to ASMR as you can get without actually hitting it. And it does have its usefulness. So let's see where I've got with this so far today. So the plan here was to code this up as just the strict regular Totoro filter. And what I've got here is a picture from the comments on how you actually do that. This is the state variable from an old blog, which is copied from Effect Design Part 1 by Totoro in 1997. And then this blog post was done in 2002. All of this is like pretty much Windows 95 era, and it's a digital approximation of Chamberlain two-pole low pass. And all of my plugin making friends basically swear by this. Go like, oh yeah, no, don't bother with biquads. For a synth filter, it's the state variable that you're going to want. And it's really, when I started fiddling with it and doing things with it, I was shocked as to how very efficient this actually is. And there's pluses and minuses to that, by the way. One of the things about that means that using this stock probably sounds like a dozen soft synths. Like it probably sounds like everybody else's soft synth, which is something that I don't typically lean towards, but I do have a twist on it, which I'm doing. So let me take a moment, and I'm going to throw another log in the fire as long as I'm doing that. Looking for a fairly respectable sized log, but if I can't find one, that's fine too. It would be really Led Zeppelin 4 of me if I was going out into the woods and hauling back firewood. That would be the most exceptionally human thing that you could do. And particularly with like taking an interest in what's going on in Substack in this era of everybody's only talking, and that's one of the things, like I can be on Blue Sky and everybody's talking politics or music and art and stuff, because the people that I pay attention to, I'll mute people if they get too overwhelming, but typically I'm watching like cartoonists, musicians, stuff like that. That's basically who follows me as well. But it's still brutally, exhaustingly politics oriented, and I sympathize completely, but it's also depressing as hell. And Substack is more along the lines of people who are off in their own little bubble somewhere and don't want to deal with the realities of the world. While I want to continue to be aware of the realities of the world, it's also interesting to be scrolling through the manipulatable feed of Substack, because you got to keep an eye out for like your Fourth Reich people and hit X and go, that was boring, to kind of manipulate the algorithm, because that will not only manipulate my algorithm, but enough of that and people will start thinking those people are boring. And it leaves you with nothing but like the pie in the sky thinkers, to the extent that they can. Like one of the things that I was watching, this seems good enough. This will do. Yeah. So one of the things that I was reading in the morning on Substack was there was a teacher who was posting about his experience with the kids these days in school along the lines of the places that you'd be assigned a book like that to read. And he was like, oh, I'm kind of worried, because he was seeing a lot of people, they would not read, they were functionally illiterate, they would not make an effort to do anything. And it feels to me as if that is not a great recipe for going into like even the immediate future, much less the continuing future. And if I can do anything towards getting people to not only look at these kinds of things and read books. I love books. My house is full of books. It's one of the reasons why I would not be a very good choice. I'm not really a natural apartment dweller. I would be better off like living in a bookstore because it's almost like that anyhow. And not everybody gets to do that. But one of the things about, like, I have found that I am listening on YouTube. If I go for things like, oh, hey, lo-fi mix or something, I will tend to be looking at the dates of things. I'm much less likely to be like, oh, hey, dub techno mix, cool. If it's not either somebody that I have known for doing that before the time of just slop, or a YouTube video that was posted doing this, like, hey, dub techno mix, hey, jazzy lo-fi, whatever, posted before the time of slop. Because I am increasingly suspicious anything that I find that is new is going to be just extruded from Suno or whatever. People talk about, like, oh, hey, Suno, they're making it so that you can't download your things. Puh. I can do a copy of the digital output of my computer off of the web browser with a simple program. Audio Hijack should do that just fine. I've got Audio Hijack on my machine. I'm sure there's comparable things for Windows and etc. And it's going to be completely and utterly trivial. If nothing else, supposing you can't even get your computer to intercede and take the output of your listening to your stuff on Suno over the web browser, etc., etc. Supposing you can't even do that, nothing you can do will make your computer record a local copy. My computer is spitting out 96K digital audio to the converters that are feeding my speakers. These computers don't have analog outs. That means it's sending a perfect digital stream, which could be intercepted and then recorded by something else. So my take on any genre that I like, especially electronic genres, or these like undistracting, put it on and tune out kinds of genres, like your ambient, your lo-fi, your lo-fi hip-hop, your lo-fi jazzy, whatever. I have no faith that those things aren't going to just be completely replaced by extruded slop. And I don't have time for that, so I'm only listening to old videos. I'm only listening to stuff off of YouTube that was like, 9 years ago? Yeah, that's probably real in some form. Like there's a guy who's doing a thing called homework music or whatever, noted for like it's 3 a.m. and I haven't slept mix, and also a bunch of mixes like mix only for foxes, mix only for cats, mix only for tigers, mix only for bears, wolves, werewolves, etc., etc., ghosts. The mix only for ghosts is actually quite popular. And as near as I can tell, what this person is a little studio owner of some kind who's really into this genre. Everything that they post seems to have like identities, as in there's an artist that was producing this, and then there's a different artist that's producing that and the other. On at least one of their mixes, they included some Boards of Canada, so I recognize that at least. But a lot of their stuff sounds like, they've got some old Ensoniq sampler, they've got a bunch of records, they've got a guitar, and like a microphone and somewhere to put the guitar and a little amp and a microphone. So what they're doing is just these very lazy, laid-back grooves that don't really go anywhere. I used to do that on a daily basis. I did a thing called daily music for a while. And got, in fact, listen to this. I'm sorry, did I say daily music? I called it daily noise, and this is literally it. So what you're seeing here is for a period of time, and I was, as I usually do, demanding too much of myself. So what I did was I did this until I couldn't anymore and then stopped. And it lasted for a couple of months. It did not bring me attention or money or anything, so I simply couldn't keep it up. It was getting in the way of everything else that I did. But during the time that I was doing this, every day I made up something different to do. Sometimes it was like this. Sometimes it's like this. And some of this stuff I don't think I had a click. This feels very sloppy. And I don't think I would have recorded drums first. I think I would have recorded something else. That's not a real horn, by the way. That is a synth. Electronic genre? Again, this might not be to a click. I play drums better now than I did then, and get better drum sounds as well. This was all daily music. I would just sit down and do something. I didn't have like my little card game. I didn't have any way to direct myself or give myself new ideas. I just had to make something up. Here's a heavy section. So I've never had a lot of success with like composing songs in this genre, but I was very interested in it nevertheless. Now you might be able to hear the kick a little bit. I'm pretty sure that is a triggered electronic kit. And the way the kick is being done is there's a kick trigger, but then I'm also sending a floor tom trigger into the same kick. So I can go put it up with my hands and feet, and that's how it's going. It's not actually doing a double kick. I can't play double kick as good as that, but I could fake it doing this. This is also why I would like to get some drum samples out there. Record stuff the way I'd like to record it now, get better drum samples, and then like, even if I never become, homeless or apartment dweller once more, and without the resources to do any of these things, it would still be worthwhile to give other people the drum sounds that I can do. That's also what Analog Me 75 is about, by the way, but I haven't been adding to that in recent years because it's all been plugins all the time. Here's yet another one. So yeah, I did this. This is actually a CD. I could put this up. I could put this up on Bandcamp and let people have it. I mean, it exists. There's a bunch of stuff like that, honestly. I did the one thing where it was like, yeah, Dragons, but through a plugin. That didn't really go anywhere, and now I'm kind of sorry I did it. Because, like, if it's not going to be a big success, then I'd rather not clutter it up. Especially with essentially a remix. I should put out the original one and then automatically give a copy to everybody who got the remix and then pull the remix down. Because I could put stuff... This did not have a cover, though. This didn't have anything other than I printed a bunch of them up on CD-ROM and I sold them at furry conventions and made back the price of it. A reggae. Chill acoustic thingy with percussion. which is just a hand snap. And that's a real hand snap, by the way, although I'm pretty sure I don't know whether I was coding reverbs at this time. This is really old. Ambient. Kind of aggressive ambient. But this exists. I can. It'll take me a little bit of time to get everything together, but I do have a previous catalog before Welcome to Free Luna, and I could put that up. In fact, the original Dragons album has physical CDs. I sold enough of the physical CDs to make the money back for having the CDs printed. They're replicated CDs. It's a real CD release. I just financed it myself. And I got that done. And that is not this. That is the Dragons album. More weird ambient? I did stuff like this back when I was in college. Getting really stoned. Truth teller here. So I made music like this back in that day. This, however, was not while I was getting really stoned. This is sober. I just enjoy this genre of music. And then lastly, the final bit. A special little odd time thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I guess it's a 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, it's a 6. Or 12. Or 4/4, but in 3 bars. But yeah. This is back when I was doing daily music. So I could put all of this stuff out if people would enjoy. You're not actually hearing it, you're hearing it over the speakers. And I have coding to do before the day is out. Coding turned out to be the thing that got people coming to the Patreon. And that's going fine, by the way. Like, the Patreon is going fine as far as being able to pay my bills and even the new car bill. It's not quite to the level of health crisis support, and arguably is, well, it's in the vicinity of being able to get housing even if everything fell apart grade. Like right now. So to be really direct and rigorous, where things are at with the Patreon, there is essentially no chance that I would become homeless as long as there were apartments available to rent. No matter what happened. No matter what happened. I'd be able to cover at least that. So that's something I appreciate a lot. You know, we don't got to buy mansions in the Catskills or whatever. It's just a matter of surviving and being able to do the work. And if I was to make more music like that, which was something I was doing at one point, as you see, I did a daily music thing, and I was doing that. And like, I think all of my drums at the time either were setting it up in funny ways to do what I meant to do with it, or just much more primitive. There was a time when I was trying to record stuff with microphones going into an old ADAT that had a weird high-frequency whine, and I have entire downloadable drum kits on Airwindows.com hiding away somewhere that are made using these samples that I made back in the day when I had like nothing. And the converters themselves were producing like an 18K whine because I had hot rodded them and wired directly into them to try to get the microphones to sound better. So yeah, I come from a place of very DIY for the reason of it had to be. There was no way to do it any other way. And yeah. So, De Toro CPP. Here's where I'd left off. Let's see how much of this I can do rather than just only talking. I mean, I'm live streaming, so I gotta talk. But I'm also live streaming this, so I gotta do something that's worth paying attention to. And I'm still not getting the damn call from Housing Authority, so I don't know what's happening with that. But here's where I left off. I'm trying to get a working version of this, which will come out on this build folder in release. That, see, I get to skip this bit. These are the only persistent variables I need to have, so I can have that there just like that. And here I am reproducing what I found in the code from the book, presumably. They're not wrong about easy to calculate coefficients and easy to process algorithm. The thing I am running into whatsoever, here's the thing. I feel like I'd like to try this and then fix the crash in a separate way. Because there's a crash here. And I think it's inherent to the concept. Maybe I should even show you the crash. I wonder if this is done. So if we do this, I believe that means 2 times sine pi times cutoff. And the intention of this is you feed in the sampling frequency and the cutoff frequency, and it gives you the exact frequency you asked for. That's why we're doing stuff like this sine. In my version, I'm not doing that. I don't have to run a sine and pi and so on and so forth. I just have to know that it's going to be between certain values and then scale where that knob is meant to go in a way that's useful. So I'm not interested in the exact frequency in the plugin I'm going to make. I'm interested in what it does musically. But when I made it from the book, first thing that happened was I went, oh, okay, this is a filter, and I sweep it down, and yep, it's a filter that is darker, and I sweep it up, and oh, it crashed. So clearly there's a value for F that is not okay, and there will be an if statement in here saying if F is larger than something, F equals something. And that'll be my way of including this in the commented out section where you get that information. Rather than just having it be printed like this, it says most res Q equals 1, less Q equals 0, so the resonance part is fine. I can add that as a comment too. And in fact, that was not true. If you have Q1, the way this is set up, and this is not actually this part here. Look, it's going to let me, or no, it's not going to let me select the text. That part there doesn't exist as variables, resonance divided by bandwidth. It's like, no, that's not how that works at all. But it's still 0 to 1, but most res is actually 0 rather than 1. Because the param B is coming in as 0 to 1. And if you set it to 0, it's the maximum resonance. If you set it to 1, it's the minimum. I decided that having resonance increase as you turned it up would be better. I'm almost certainly also going to add some kind of tilt to this in the version that I put out. One of those power function things where it will like ramp up into higher resonances more smoothly or just give me a better taper to the control. Because it's all about having a useful taper to the control. You want to have it so that as you move the control, the areas you're moving it in give musically useful results rather than having everything be stuck in one tiny little area and then the rest of the control movement is useless. And then let's see, 1 minus param b gives me the actual value. More comments? And then Q of 0.0 is just a tone. So you can get arbitrarily close to nothing comes in, it's just a musical note. Was the resonant filter I made on Tuesday going to be good as a guitar wah? Probably. Now, whether there might be an alternate way of going about making that, because the wah, doing it as a wah might lean more heavily on it being actually the bandpass that you keep. So this state variable filter, and this is what we're looking at and why I'm coding this up to have as part of the plugin, even though it's all going to be commented out when I'm done. This produces a low pass, a high pass, a band pass, and then you can also do a notch by having only the high and low. Plus, I am not at all sure that if you have all of them turned up, in fact, I'm pretty sure if you have all of them turned up, it's still not flat. So this is like a synth filter. This is not the kind that I do in order to have perfect results. Those are their cutoff filters, and it might be possible to make this become one of those. I would have to do it in the way that I do my other filters, so it might be worth me, similarly to how I do like the pair filter, coming up with a way of just having a whole array of these and repeatedly subtracting stuff to get lower and lower bands, and then reconstructing them to the flat input signal again, and then repeatedly doing that to get steeper cutoffs. This would probably work well. So is this a DJ style filter for synths? Not exactly. It's pretty much straight up a synth filter. This is something that I learned about when people were talking about filters in a plugin maker hangout that I'm privy to. That, or people were talking about filters in the Surge XT forum, which everybody's privy to, or just people like Paul, Bacon Paul, might have been talking about this. But the idea is you don't want to use biquad filters for synth filters because it doesn't stand up to modulating it very quickly, whereas this one does stand up to modulating it very quickly. And what I'm doing here is demonstrating what that is, and I will continue to, let's see, so between that and begin loop, there is the thing that says low and high and band equals 0. But we're instantiating high here for two reasons. One, because I can, and two, because we don't have to keep this around for very long. This can be, in fact, this can be a final. Actually, no, it's not registering that, is it? No, it could be const. So if you tell the compiler you're doing that, then you know that you're doing just a single variable. You're defining it with this value, and then you're never going to need to update that value, but you will need to refer to it somewhere, which we're going to do almost immediately. Now, the reason we're setting it up like that, so let's firstly, I'm looking it over. I could also include the notch situation. Hang on. I'll have to tweak some of my other stuff a little bit, but not right now, because this is my template. So I have all of the available parameters, and I'm looking at one of those giant piles of sliders. When I have the plugin finished, what I do is I take all the other ones away. But at the moment, I still have all of that set up. So we can do a little functional thing where, yes, I can blend all of these together, but I can also turn only one of these up at any given time. And it'll show you what the output of that thing is. So, and I'll do the comment. Again, with the question about wah pedals, and I might be able to do some experimenting with this to see whether this has any use as a simple notch, because this might not be clean enough to use as a real notch filter. I don't know. It might mess with the phase in weird ways and make everything be screwed up. We shall see. And notch output. So if this is not as effective a notch output as a biquad notch, because a biquad is able to be pretty accurate around some of these things. You can tell it what it's supposed to be and it'll do that thing. This might not be like that. On the other hand, remember in a previous stream, don't mind me shuffling around and it's slightly uncomfortable because my phone's in my pocket, hoping to get that telephone call. Remember in a previous stream when we went and looked at something that some hacker was currently doing regarding modeling the old Mesa Boogie Mark II amp in digital. And they were modeling it on the basis of circuit components. And that was very neat. But in another sense, what they were doing was putting together a series of filters into distortions, into other filters, into things. And what the Mesa Boogie Mark II V or whatever it was they were doing was a series of passive filters going into distortion. And when I say passive filters, I mean stuff like this would qualify. Into distortion, into a series of notch filters. Well, that we see here, notch filter is one of the available outcomes. And what the output of the, I remember doing this. I remember talking about this on stream. Guy was getting very neat results. But, you don't have to model it on a component basis. And in fact, sometimes there might be something to be lost modeling it on a component basis. So effectively, in order to get your heavy Mesa Boogie sound in the box, and I'm pretty sure he also had to run into a cab simulator, but I have the current cab simulator out of Airwindows, where cabs 2 is more of my weird filters doing their thing. And it ends up doing a pretty good job of making the right kind of roll-offs, but in a more adjustable way, and without all the mess of doing a big convolution impulse. So I'm very curious about that as well. But essentially, what you could do, and remember I'm still quite interested in exploring what I want to do, maybe today, maybe next week, is get into my Bezier curve undersampling and go, well, I already know that I can do the undersampling. And it has known characteristics, some of which are pretty weird and flaky, but it's all fun and good. Can I also do Bezier oversampling? Can I make a curve where it reconstructs the curve, making a whole bunch of little intermediary points, however many points I want, based on taking samples off of what will be a curve defined by the input sampling rate. So essentially we have this sample, this sample, this sample. Let's take them as the 3 points that we draw the Bezier curve around, and then draw a curve to match those points, upsample using that same technique. It's not an audio technique, it's a graphics technique, but it runs fairly quickly, and I'm even getting to the point of being able to find like the conversion to equation that they have, and not having to do it purely on the basis of primitive point-by-point lerping between all the points. That could be neat. And then if we're reconstructing a curve, we get to do a upsampling that is way the heck better than, or maybe just way the heck more interesting than simply doing a linear upsampling. Or indeed, a high-quality sync upsampling, which is the way that you do it if you wanted to have like maximum pre-ring, but then also be able to have a really sharp cutoff in audio terms and get all of that stuff correct. The Bezier thing doesn't have to have pre-ring, and I'm very excited about what that can mean, because it'll still give you a curve, even though it's not a linear phase brick wall. It's a brick wall-like thing. It's also different. I've never tried upsampling with the Bezier curve, and then applying something like clipping, which can be very primitive, and then downsampling using a Bezier curve. But what I'm doing with all the reverbs and everything else that we've been using this entire time is literally downsampling. It's literally doing a downsampling and producing that curve. I'm also curious as to what I can do regarding, I have a filter coming out, and it's the same filter that I need to fit into the new version of 2Tape that's also being worked on today, hopefully worked on today, that is not, I've got the new filter, the new version of Slew 4, I think it is. That's ready to come out. That might come out this coming weekend if I don't get this stuff done. And it is layering averaging filters in a way where I do have to define the averaging filters, but it's really fairly efficient to work. And then using just integer modulus calculations to pretty much make a little range of variables that you can just keep cycling through rapidly and never have to bucket brigade things along or anything like that. It'll just always automatically do what you want. And then when you do a series of averaging filters like that, and these are not windowed, they are rectangular window averaging filters, which has profound consequences in terms of where the frequency response shape goes. In other words, the stop band winds up with these crazy steep notches and irregularities. But I found that when you calculate it out properly and then overlay them onto each other, you can have notches coincide with where the lobes of the previous one's stop band were. And it's still a messy roll-off, but it's crazy close to a beautiful, incredibly steep brick wall, but without having pre-ring, because it's not linear phase. It just ends up being incredibly steep. And it's weird, and the weirdness is probably why people don't use this. And you can't simply use just a broad rectangular averaging and get useful results. But I feel like doing this, you maybe can. And if I ran the first a Bezier oversampling, and then clipping, and then this new kind of averaging filter based stacking them on top of each other filter, which can go down low enough to where it would matter, and it's also efficient to run, And then the undersampling. I feel like that would be a deeply unusual and strange, but perhaps worthwhile, Airwindows oversampled distortion. And if that works, I can use it in other things as well. Back to this. Where I left off, I just said const double high equals Q times input sample minus low minus Q times band. What I see in the textbook version is high equals scale times input minus low minus Q times band, all kind of run together. But just above it said scale equals Q. So I simply replaced it with Q because I don't get why you would even do that. That seems kind of dumb. I presume it is because we are using the resonance variable number to scale what we're doing with the input sample. But if so, you're simply using Q. See, it says scale equals Q right there. So I'm not going to bother calling it scale just because that does. And when I did this, it did actually work. Then we've got band equals F times high plus band. That's the same as band plus equals F times high. Much like low plus F times band is the same as low plus equals F times band. In fact, I do not need this parenthesis here because it's clear enough that you got to do this math before you get to add it. Precedence of like plus equals operators is clearly below do all of this stuff first and then you get to add what the result is. Similarly to where equals is very low on the arithmetic precedence. And then lastly, we've got notch equals high times low. But what we need to do now is include these output values in a way that's going to look appropriate. And we do have to retain do we have to retain input sample? I feel like maybe we do not. Let's find out. So here we start bringing in stuff based on these output controls, output volume controls that we've got here. Like the one that I have up top, I had to fiddle with a little bit because at one point I had it being band plus equals F Q times input sample times like somewhere in there. Actually, I think it was input sample equals low times out plus my negative sign times band times 1.0 minus Q, etc. that I had going on. And that proved to be not correct, so I set it up so that it does have an output control that doesn't add further weirdness to it. But what we're looking at now is going to be just straight up output controls for each of these options. And then we're going to build it, and then we're going to try it and see whether it actually works. Excuse me with the coughing. So we can just follow this pattern. And it was going to be high. Yep. Okay, there we go. I do. I wonder whether that's actually worth doing, though. Can we assume that I can make a comment of notch is low and high at the same time? I feel like I could. I feel like that's legit. Let's do that. So now we don't have an out n, so I don't have to update the controls to say that either. And here's what we're looking at. Now I could do this in such a way that it's combining things in weird ways. I'm not doing that right at the moment. Also, let's quickly demonstrate the crash thing I was talking about. Oh, interesting. Oh, okay, here's something that has to do with C programming that you can learn about. Where it says expected semicolon before const, what that means is it broke and didn't register this stuff. And therefore, band plus equals f times high. Turns out high was not declared because we broke it before we got to this point, and so it didn't do this line, even though the line itself is fine. And because it didn't do this line, it made another problem following up. But if I'm not mistaken, all it's got to do is just add that semicolon. And then it's happy with it. See, that wasn't actually 2 errors, it was only 1. We bring that over to there. We maybe go and see, we've just done this, and so we don't need to keep looking at that. Which means I can open my synth tones folder, open the string orchestra sound, and Dattoro is one of my more recent effects. So if we set frequency really low, it'll be fine. And we're listening to low. Notice something interesting, though. What with all this weird sign business, the code from the actual book says frequency is this times 20K, 20,000. F is this times sine m pi times cutoff divided by get sample rate. Well, that would imply that our cutoff says that param A times 20,000, we can get a 2,000 hertz by having it be 0.1. It's already fairly high in frequency. Let's see if that's true. So that's supposed to be a 2,000 hertz tone on our frequency control. Let's close that for a moment and loop a little section which hopefully has those overtones in there. And let's run an effect stack. Do we have a Dattoro? No, we do not. But I'm going to want one, so let's go and make one. Recent effects Dattoro. It's keeping the same variables we had. Now we want to look at what this looks like in span. And hopefully span will run efficiently, but if it doesn't, I don't care. We'll just use it anyway. Is this 2K? Nope, that's 3K. So that's interesting. The book said it was thus and so, but instead it is this. And then we can zero zero one is way the heck into the base. And let me see, it was 0, 1. Okay, so 20K divided by 10. Although I may be miscalculating here because bear in mind, yeah, that doesn't make it an octave, does it? But we're supposed to be able to spell out what frequency you get by putting it into this equation. And I don't think it's doing its job. Our code claims cutoff equals get param A times 20K. So this should be giving me things like 2K or 200. And granted, those aren't octaves. 200, 400, 800, those are octaves. But it should at least be able to give me the accurate results. And yet, that's not the case. So that's more like 300 or so. Then we've got 0.1. That's giving me a little under 3K. That's not giving me 2K, even though we have told it to be get param A times 20K, multiply it by 0.1, you get 2000, but this is not 2000. F is 2 times sine m pi times cutoff divided by get sample rate. So what are we missing? Could it be that there's a precedence of operations in here that it needs? Okay, firstly, let's save, not the preset, no. Let's save the stack, because we're going to be playing with this with noise later. Not sot, dot. There we go. So does it act any differently if we have cutoff, which is get param A times 2000 divided by sample rate? I should think that, so the Datora source has 2. So it can't be 2 plus because that would be completely screwed up. It has to be something. So I'm still a bit at a loss as to what they were driving at with this. But that's why we're playing with it. Essentially, this algorithm is making a claim that it's able to do a particular thing and then failing to do it. I'd like to know why. Let's see if it gives me any different behavior than it had before. Again, we're at 2K, but it's supposed to be giving me, we're using 20K, but it's supposed to be giving me 2K. And we're at, I think we're at 96. Yeah, we're going to be at, are we? No, I think, no, we're at 96K. Okay. We're at 96K and it's giving us 3K, not 2. Almost as if the number we're actually looking for is not really 2000 after all. Or 20,000 rather. Also, there was a thing I was going to show you, which we'll do before this. If your frequency goes up to what I think it's going to be half of Nyquist, but it might be a quarter of Nyquist. Let's find out. So if this dies at half of Nyquist, it'll die when it sweeps up to 50K. If it can only go up to a quarter of Nyquist, it'll die when it hits 25. There's your 10K we were talking about before. And there's 20K. And at 25, still alive at 25. Notice now we have a peak over 30K. So what's happening here is we're at a 96K sample. It is unable to crash under these circumstances. Spelling it out as the frequency is 20,000 is actually making it so the frequency is like 30. Let's do a little calculation, shall we? 20K divided by 44.1 times 48 is 21.7, so it's not that. I'm a little puzzled as to what Totoro is driving at in this code that apparently is published in a book, because it is not giving me a value that accurately reflects what frequency it was you asked it to do. It's doing something else. And that is puzzling. But one thing I can do here is demonstrate what I was telling you about. Because I started this on a 44.1K version. And we can make one of those. Now we've got the audio at 44. Now Nyquist is here. It's drawn using a line, and it's right there. Now I can crash this because it won't be able to handle me sweeping up all the way to what it said it was. So here we are going up, and it dies as it goes just over 5. And we can rerun it. It's not exactly at 0.5, is it? But when that frequency gets close enough... Now, out of curiosity, I also would like to see whether I can get it to go to 20K, and whether it's just Nyquist that is causing a problem, or if it goes beyond what I told the frequency to be. Let's find out. So it thinks the frequency can go up to 20K or above. Okay, we're boosting near Nyquist. It's throwing a little flip up there, right where that is. So it doesn't like that much, does it? That is potentially a nasty ring. So you have to make this not quite hit Nyquist. Let's see what the frequency of 20K times 0.543 is. Because we do know that at least is causing a reaction, and it's making it be exactly near Nyquist. So 20K time is the number we're feeding into this. 0.543 is mighty close. It is 10,860. F doesn't get to be beyond 10,860. For 4.10. Oh, that was multiplying instead by mistake. Don't mind me. I'll get there. 4.1K. $4,000. $10,250. So that is what happens. If you go beyond, for instance, by doing this, it breaks it. And that is exactly 1/4 Nyquist is the death zone. So F has to be less than 1/4 Nyquist. And we can code that. Let's first quit it, close that, don't save the changes. This business of F is 2 times sine m pi blah 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 is like useless. So let's continue with fussing with this. And then we're going to go back over to the actual filter I'm going to put out. And we can even start playing with it in relation to a compressor, because that's definitely something I'm going to need to do. But right now, I want to do a little safety check here. In fact, I'm going to revise my comments. So if this isn't a textbook, God help us all. But there is a way to get past that. So firstly, let's make all of this a lot simpler. No cutoff, no relation to frequency. We're not even going to try to find a frequency. Let's move this down here. All right, let's see what we did. A goes from 0 to 1. So some things like, for instance, biquad filters have a hard limit of around 0.5, where you can't make the frequency go beyond 0.5 or it freaks out. I'm pretty sure this one has its hard limit at 0.25. That's what we're going to see here. In fact, we can do it using a multiply. Technically, that's the same. Build that. Now we get to see whether it actually tracks all the way to the Nyquist frequency or not. Or indeed, whether literally having it be 0.25, will that bring it up to the Nyquist frequency and then crash? Do we have to be an infinitesimal bit smaller than 0.25? And that's possible. Okay, let's do the human voice sound, just for funsies. Load up effect stack so that we can watch it on the meter. Here's our filter sweep. Okay. I can go down to low, and it's going up to, okay, around 6K. So this gets to be higher than I thought. We'll try 0.5. Remembering also, this recording is at 96K, so it's not getting anywhere near close to what it was meant to be. Maybe the business with two, let's find out what we get. Let's skip that and just try using directly 0 to 1. The resonance goes from 0 to 1, or 1 to 0, if you prefer. We'll soften this ultimate steepness a little bit. I think the cue of 0 to 0 literally is just a crash, not even a tone. That's what it was doing before. So now we have it going from 0 to 1. String Orch seems to have more high frequencies, so we'll play with that. And we're at 96K. Sweep up. How high does this go now? Okay, at 96K, we get to do this, and this appears to literally be going to, like, I can kind of sort of see the range there. There, I can see better now. So we're at 96K, and it's cutting off at about 21. That's amusing. I can plainly see where it's sitting. Also, can we make that little thing show up more if we include band? We're manipulating reso instead of freak. Here's where we get resonant, or not so much. It's got a fairly decent tone for a bog standard synth filter. My filter also applies a volume correction. Hey, Ben. Yeah, I may be not getting to see the email right now, but I not infrequently reply to email. Like, I'll not infrequently reply to emails. Reasons why I might not reply to an email is, hey, we're a giant company and we want to use AI to build all of your stuff into this, so can you please tell us everything that we should do? And also we'll give you a revenue share. And usually I'll ignore that stuff because it's MIT licensed anyway. And if you want my buy-in in doing something like that, do it the way I would do it. Let's see, where's this at? So we can get a little peek out of it at just over 20K. There's not much of one though. And it's not save preset, but save stack I'm going to want. That's also going to save Voxengo the way it is. I feel like also the amplitude of things is slightly off from what it maybe should be, but that's another story. I'm going to do the simplest form of this filter. Let's see, how far are we? Let's do this one thing. And then what I'm going to do is throw another log on, make another cup of coffee, hit the restroom, and we'll go from there. Because it's noon. It's time for me to make my second cup of coffee, but not before I test this. Let's see what this algorithm now wants to do. We've made it so this internal calculation no longer goes to a frequency. It goes to a 0 to 1 measurement. What does that mean? It means the 0 to 1 measurement now extends to 11K. Interesting. I believe this has some implications. Oh, Ben, if that's all you were asking, your answer is absolutely yes. Go ahead. You would not be the first person to do that. But yes, with my blessing, go and do it and ask me questions about it on stream. This is the best place to talk to me about that. I do not wish to have a bunch of people trying to privately do my stuff and make like juice and whatever and do their own skins for it and have me personally guiding them all via email. And then that's like using up all my time in emails for stuff that is technically just open to all. But this is the right place for you to ask me anything, because if anybody else is in the same boat, they can see my answer on the stream. And you can see my answers to them on the stream. And everybody can kind of take the stuff and run forwards. Because the thing with the MIT license is you're allowed to use MIT license in closed source commercial work. You have to credit. And you can't take away my right to have my stuff be open. So you pretty much, you have to say, and I'm using Chris's tutorial filter or whatever, and go from there. If you're using my code, it is not a viral license. It is not a license that says your code has to be open too. It would probably be a better PR move for you to do a viral, not a viral, it would be a better PR move for you to open your own source and share it with others who might also want to do similar things. But it's not a requirement under MIT. That's my understanding. Well, philosophy is even better for talking about on stream. And yeah, so my way of doing the price range, I have stuck really hard. Let me scroll this down a little bit. My way of dealing with the price range thing is all of my stuff comes out as free open source, and I make the downloads all available, and stuff like Consolidated it's being done by other open source people. So Paul is very unlikely to try to put a paywall on Consolidated, for instance. But I do the Patreon for if what I'm doing that you can see on the streams and everything is worthwhile enough. When people come around being like, I love what you do, let me throw money, I go, okay, go ahead and throw money. Patreon's pretty decent as far as that kind of thing is concerned, because you can set it up where people can jump in for the smallest amount that they can afford. It's not very efficient to do small amounts. Like if you do $1, a lot of your money is going to Patreon and not much of it is going to me. But I make that possible because that's the way I have to do patronage. If there's people who I would like to be a patron to, I have to pick people who are only at the $1 pledge amount because there's more than one of them. I can't just do a bunch of people all at $10 a pop. I think it would be great if lots of people had enough money that they were able to be patron to a bunch of people at $10 a pop, and I can't do that. I can't do that. So I make sure that mine also has a really low pledge level. And then my way of doing the price range so that the community can afford it, but I also have something to offer for people who have more money to spend, is the $10 and up pledge range, which is high to my standards. I wouldn't be able to do that, but for people who do, I make an extra video every week where I'm sharing something out of my record library. And if you've seen my recent posts along the lines of forbidden music, where it does a meter recording of stuff that you don't get to put on YouTube and you only hear little snippets of it, the $10 patrons get that without the snippets, just full audio for things that are allowed to be on the YouTube and just maybe not monetized or whatever. And that's what I do. I've been doing this for a while. I've got a goodly number of them up now. So people who have enough money to pledge more get something out of it, but the something that they get isn't the plugins, and it isn't their ability to come and ask me for plugins to do or anything like that. They get my time and attention and me talking about the record that I'm doing and whatever, a little bit more video shooting each week. And they get that, so I'm putting something else in and spending time and talking to people. Some people like listening to the videos just to hear me go on. And I'm putting all of that in, and I do a little more of it on video shooting day. And then that's the bonus. That's the bonus for being able to have the something to be sold, something that is my time and attention that's being sold to people who are able to spend extra money. And that's how that works. So you could take stuff that you build out of my source code and turn it into something that you do, whether it be an open source thing or a closed source thing where you're crediting that you're using Airwindows code to build your thing. I would suggest if you are AI vibe coding and also wanting to do closed source, that's maybe not the best move. Because if you're closed sourcing, people are going to assume you're competent and able to maintain what you make. And if you're vibing the stuff, it might not be a good idea to do that in a closed source style of way, because there will be assumptions about people assume you'll be able to support it. And that might not necessarily be the case. So let me figure out what I'm doing with this. In fact, maybe we'll even put this aside for now. Get ready to do some stuff with my, let's see, noise 96 and noise 192. But let's also skip over to display overlay. And I'm going to take a moment to figure out using the screen's speakers, which one of these would be fun to put on. Okay, this was like some kind of... That's some kind of industrial techno thing. I do believe that timestamps of these will... I'm going to name what these dumb things are so that next time I go and do a break to put another log on my fire and go and do the things I need to do, I can choose what kind of vibe we put it. We're going to call this a modular. Because it sounds very much like, hi, I plugged a bunch of things into a bunch of things. It's doing random stuff. I don't know what I'm doing. That's what that session sounds like. I'll call it modular slop even. I'm not impressed with that jam. Session B. Okay, that's more of a groove. It's kind of repetitive. I bet what I'm doing here, it's those little side grooves that matter. So like there's percussion in there. That's definitely a groove. B. Groove. So this will be useful. I might actually end up being able to make this into an album at some point. And soon enough you will see whatever we select, or hear whatever we select, as a me taking a break background music piped straight through into the stream. We are clearly going into weird other changes here. Feels like I started with where the previous one was at. Kind of aggressive sounding. We got sort of noises poking through. And then it turns fully into the noises. This is being mixed on the fly in console using Airwindows reverbs. Probably Alien Spaceship. C Journeys, we'll call that. So if I was to do that and then I would cut into like B groove periodically, it would be a returning to a stable groove that might sound nicer, and I'd be able to put together an arrangement of it that would be more pleasing than just sitting with Journeys the entire time. And I'm pretty sure this already sounds like it's going to be the ambient one. Totally. D, industrial ambient. And then we have 3 more. Session F. Experiments in boops. Yeah, this is, we're going through every stage of the circuit bend thing. This was all off the stream. Okay, this is like another journey. It does have a beat. We seem to be hanging out with this little groove. Starts out a lot slower. Starts with 5 minutes of just getting a groove. By the time I get up to here, we've got one. Easily enough, we'll call that F finding a groove. And here we have session G. I think this is more industrial ambient. There was a Frank Zappa technique that sounded like this. Apostolic Vlorch injector is what he called it. So what this was an experiment in making the randomness of these things just arbitrarily throw weird crap out. And it seems to be working. G, Vlorch injections, is what that's called. The apostolic Vlorch injector was, in fact, a thing on the Apostolic Studios where Zappa had available 3 tracks and you had push buttons. So what you'd do is he would record stuff to tape at extremely high level, just any old thing, whatever, but it would be distorted to the tape as hard as you could go. And then he would have the buttons set to hold the button down to play the track. And then he would just tap the buttons like and he would play it like that, play in the studio in such a way that's like it's hand played, it's a percussion instrument. It's not meant to be holding it down for very long, just these brief little windows. And it's a mechanical window because it's a physical connection of the wire to a contact closing that switch. So it had a lovely crisp attack and release to it. It was basically wildly overloaded sounds going through a making and breaking electrical contact. And it was very neat, and that is basically what session G was. Let's see what session H was. Okay, it's trying to do a walk-in bass, and it's not very good. Where did it get to? I agree, JFrag, I agree. Turns out Sgt. Pepper's is a big success for a good reason. And the remixes and such do not capture what's actually there. Okay, at this stage we've gotten into a little groove, haven't we? I don't hear much changing here. Pretty good little shuffle, though. Yeah, that's another groove. And I call that coming home groove, seeing as there with the journeys and all. And so now we have all of these things named. How did you make air and high voice on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper? A lot of it's performance, as you know. But by this time, the Beatles were already doing things like running input channels into other input channels in order to get a sound. So, and that notably was the DI guitar injection on the loud version of Revolution that they did in the studio. And all of this is before the Dark Side of the Moon console. This is all the old tube console. So that is much like they did much later in drum and bass with Mackie, patching channels into other channels into other channels. They were doing that on the Red console back in the day. So it's not impossible that if they needed more air, they'd patch channels into channels, but most likely what was happening, if you're hearing extra highs in there, it was using the stuff on the Red console to just go, this sounds better when we crank the lows and highs as far as they will go and then pull the mid-range out to taste. And then let's use this particular microphone, and let's use this chamber reverb or whatever. There's the chamber reverb in Sgt. Pepper's quite a bit. They had the Abbey Road chamber. I don't know if they had, I think they had plates at the time, but it was the main studio miking, and then they had the chamber. They were able to do all those things. Honestly, back in the day, the distant miking was more common. So what you're hearing that's new is not so much distant ambient reverb miking, so much as it's being able to have stuff right up on the mic and figuring out how to make that work. They were also using the Fairchild 670 on input as often as they wanted, because they only had the one of them. It was a big, ugly beast. But increasingly, Jeff Emmerich had the nerve to try all manner of things and record them to tape. I'm pretty sure that's how that works, because bear in mind, they did not have the opportunity to do multiple instances of Fairchild 670 on mixdown. They barely had the opportunity to do mixdown, because all of that was still Sgt. Pepper's 4-track. So they had to get stuff on input. And that means, yes, Mike, also EQing on input, also using things like their compressors on input, because then you have it to tape and you can use it again elsewhere. And it's all to 4 tracks. And so alrighty, so here we are, Stream Audio. Now we have this stuff labeled. Have we got a request for what to listen to as I go and put another log on my fire, make my cup of coffee, and go and take care of that stuff? I'm going to suggest not modular slop. I don't think that's very focused. Would you like the groove? Would you like the other groove? Would you like a third groove, which doesn't change very much? Do you want to sit through journeys as it wanders and explores? Would you like industrial techno or industrial ambient? I'm going to suggest maybe not vortex injection, but if you would like, you can have that too. Choose. A through H. Choose one. Then I'll go off and we'll get back to the coding very soon. Kiwi fruit is not a choice. We're looking at A through H. Modular slop, groove, journeys, industrial ambient, industrial techno, finding a groove, which I could put it part of the way into actually having found it. Vortex injection, which is like weird noises, or coming home groove. Oh, you would like, somebody said vortex injection, ask and you shall receive. Not only that, we will watch what it looks like on, probably this will be enough. Start in there. Effect stacks, content peak. Here we are. Ask and you shall receive. You absolutely may have vortex injection. I do have to set the setting to SWB audio capture because I get to put this straight through to the stream. Over to your Vlorch. Enjoy.
Tell you more about my culture if you define what I mean, what you mean by that. I'm not quite sure what you mean by culture. We'll figure it out. To the background noise of Lorch, it is putting logs on the fire time. Press. There's your visual decoration for background music. No harm done though. That ought to be good.
I have no good way of fading that out or anything like that, so it would just switch off. So what fun. Looks like I was able to go over some of these stream audio things and actually associate them with musical genres, meaning that I could probably put that out. I'd see you later, Chad. Burnout is real. I mean, keeping up the pace that I do, you don't see me off stream. I'm not necessarily grinding away off stream as well, so there's that. And if you wonder how I do like 8-hour stretches and stuff, that's fairly normal for, I don't know, autistic nerds who are interested in whatever it is they're doing. That's not so unusual. But yeah, and it's about finding things that are interesting and pursuing them. Speaking of which, let's run the Ditoro again. So where I was at, I was working out how this worked with regard to what you could do in terms of the resonance. And I wanted to see what some of these filters were doing. That's interesting. So would you look at this? We can do resonant filters, but watch what happens. First of all, our maximum frequency at 96K is a little over 20. That's what 1 is. And what I was observing is, let's see, can I specify the exact frequency? That's 24.1K. Oops. So we are not looking at 1 being the Nyquist of this filter algorithm. I'm comfortable in assuming that if I sweep past the Nyquist point, it dies. Let's fool with that a little bit more. If we exactly double it, that didn't do what I wanted at all. Undo. So if we exactly double it, what then? Because there was that 2 in the algorithm. It's just that the 20K business that they had was screwed up and wrong. Let's see if this takes us to either being broken or not actually being broken. New algorithm, set it down first, hit play. Here's a sweepable filter. Ah, look at that. So I bet you if I sweep this past the Nyquist frequency, it breaks. Let's do that very carefully and gingerly. Zero 0.7. Any more? Nope, that was the point. So it's 0.7 of 2 that is the death point. Let's see if that holds on all of the filter frequencies. Noise 96. That's not what I wanted at all. Noise. Same thing. Ah, that's where the filter frequency dies. I can plainly see, oh, yep, and it's right to the point where it freaked out and died. It wanted the filter to be that high to run. So that's interesting. I didn't realize as you lowered the filter, it made more of a problem. But all the same, I do see that 0.7-ish is around the Nyquist frequency. And in fact, I just found that if we lower reso enough, it breaks. So what happens when we take 0.699? It breaks. Zero 0.694. It breaks. So that's interesting. Like our breakpoint is different based on what reso is. Interesting. Yeah, that broke. And yet we can have it right up near Nyquist as long as there is resonance in there. So let's drop it right back. Let's make it be 0.5. I will put my coffee down for long enough to hold Option. Do we get this to break by setting it to exactly 0.5 of 2 and then lowering resonance? Doesn't really look like it. Also, we can set our output levels, and that's convenient in case we need to do this. Well, if we have it very resonant, we can go right up to around 0.7. But then if we lower resonance again, it breaks. So if we're at no resonance, at what point does it break? It's not 0.5. Or 0.6. Looks like it's trying to get to 7, but that makes no sense at all. Up. Up. Got something. Maybe we have a sensitive area where exactly half of this and exactly half of this, let's see. I don't think so, but I should be able to find the point at which the algorithm breaks here. Because you see what's happening on the very extreme? It starts to freak out a little bit. That's just amplitude, that doesn't matter. So the question becomes, what reso is the most sensitive for making it crash? Because we can go all the way to 0.7 with reso at 0 or 1. Partial reso is susceptible to crashing. And I might be able to come up with an algorithm that handles this, which is apparently more than original Toro did. What do we got? Okay, it goes lower, goes lower. I'm willing to bet that 0.5 is in fact the most sensitive area. I'm not sure, but that does mean I can dial in this maximum frequency a little bit more. If we make that spike go high enough, the program will crash. Okay, it's at 0.638. Have I maybe read this incorrectly, that it's not exactly 0.5 that's the sensitivest area? No, I think that's actually correct. It would be a little funny if it turned out to be like golden ratio or something hilarious like that. What's my biggest peak that I can make here? Let's boost it some more and see what we can do. Up, went too far. Up, we got runaway. Yep, we are seeing the point at which it freaks out and cannot manage. Hey, Jonathan. Well, one interesting thing about the White Album is there is Beatle on record about it that kind of corresponds to what you're talking about. So there is extremely strong songs on there, yes. But John Lennon was interviewed at one point, and he became very fierce and was like, listen, all you experts listen, none of you can hear. Sgt. Pepper's was the last Beatles album. Nobody seems to have figured out that the White Album was nothing but everybody's solo record piled together into a lump. Pepper was the last real Beatles album. After that point, they were all pulling in different directions. And I think that is a correct evaluation. It's extremely strong, but it's not a Beatles album. It's 4 solo albums, or 2, 3, whatever you want to call it. And that's not the same thing. It's much like the Grateful Dead had their own sort of brain jam, Grateful Dead spirit thing going on, and lost it to drugs and the woes of the road. Let's see. We are trying to get it to run away. Looks to me like this is about the max. It can't go any farther than that. So logically, if I pull these back each just a tiny bit, I'll have a kind of optimum. And by that I think I mean I need to pull frequency back just a tiny bit, because reso is about maxed out. And that means our maximum boost is 0.64 times 2. So if we quit out of here, $1.28 is our magic number. And we can also throw a curve on this. For a solo albums in a trench coat, indeed. That is, John Lennon would probably have laughed his ass off at that. Well done. That is a very Lennon-y quip. So we can leave that there probably. Let's do a quick build. Let's test to see whether it is now immune from crashing. There's probably also a way of balancing it out so everything can hit the maximum effect, but this is really kind of what we're looking at. We'll do quickly noise 192. I'm not going to run this for long because it's going to make the computer real unhappy, but gotta find out. So max reso, no reso. Fast, well, I can see what that is. I'm sweeping right past it because we do not have frequency high covering Nyquist anymore. You can only turn it up to 96K. Here's where Nyquist is. So it'll go up to about 70K. I think that's going to be sufficient. Here's our maximum feedback. There's no real reference to a frequency, but that's akin to what I do anyhow, so it's fine. We'll quit out of there. That part seems legit, so I think I'm good with that. But I was going to do this. See, we can do a frequency scale. In fact, I'm going to take this and include it in the final. This turns out to be how far you can sweep it without it breaking. Beyond that, at the right reso section, at the right reso setting, it'll break. But we don't want that. Here's our Q limitation. That seems about right. We could do a power factor on that as well. That's not going to be related to overall scale. That's going to be just plain. We'll build that. We'll jump back into the noise, and we'll see what kinds of things this does. So what you're looking at is the Airwindows Toro filter, but I have a modification to it that I'm going to have to examine to see how that works. So here's the low pass at our maximum amount of resonance. If you add bandpass, it didn't really change much, but there's an interesting thing about bandpass that I noticed. And then high pass, also akin to, you see no resonance, it's just noise. But sure enough, I guess you add all these things together, that's pretty flat. That looks flat. And you can have a fairly consistent width notch filter. Well, I didn't see that coming. Increasing the resonance is doing nothing but turning down the overall volume and leaving the notch where it was. So as we reduce resonance, what we end up getting is everything fills in around the place where the notch was, but the notch is still cut down to essentially this level. Normally, if you had a notch, what it would do is get narrower and narrower, but that's not what this is doing at all. Instead, hello? Oh, I see. So I don't know what the hell that is. Does it move? Yup. Okay. We can apparently make a resonant frequency with reso turned all the way up, even with all of these bands set to the same. Even with high all the way up. So here's one of the things I was observing with this. Because, again, this is a textbook filter, except for I'm tweaking it a little bit to lock in where it's unstable and make it in such a way that it'll adapt to sample rates. In fact, I've done enough demonstrating with this high sample rate. We're going to take that away again, because it's only making the program unhappy, but it's not really giving us anything. 96K, we get to do the same games, but we get to see what it does at Nyquist. And as you see, we raise the reso, and that's pulling the actual resonant frequency down. So this is not unlike when I was doing the biquad filters and was doing a simple averaging filter on top of them. And somebody showed up in chat on the live stream who knew all about exactly how you had to tweak the variables on that filter to make it be exactly the right frequency that it needed to be. And so I incorporated all of that, and it was very cool. I don't know if there is a comparable person for adjusting frequency based on what this is. Because we're looking at the Toro filter, we're looking at the state variable filter. And yet it's got some funny behaviors. Like, again, if we lower resonance, that value goes up. See, the value here is just past Nyquist, and as we raise Reso, there's a spot around here where that is as close to Nyquist as it can get, and you see the result that it has. Quite shockingly. Past Nyquist, sweep through the Nyquist point, we get a big peak there, and then lower than Nyquist. And at full resonance, we've dropped it right down to quite a bit lower than 50K. But as we lower the reso, the interaction between the frequencies, and this is almost certainly going to be the case for bandpass as well, it goes to where now we've got a bandpass, but the bandpass is centering around the Nyquist frequency. And if we drop the frequency, we get this. And what I've done with that power function stuff is, and also note I have a power function on the reso as well, so that is designed to be a more flexible way of working with it. We're making it so you have some control over this high stuff here. So at this reso, we have a pretty straightforward roll-off. No reso, it starts to round off at the top, but around 0.5 or a little lower, it's a fairly flat-looking roll-off, except for as we swoop up into the highs, it'll start developing a bit of a peak around Nyquist, which is flattening it out there. And there's the last of my coffee. But this is a fine thing to be doing today. So here's the thing that interested me. We have low pass. We have bandpass, which seems to kind of combine the two, sort of, but also kind of not. Like that's clearly, there's a little resonance in there. It lifts up just a bit. In fact, let's heighten that. No, wait, let's not. Let's go low pass, band pass, high pass, and a high pass without band pass means we've got a little bit of a notch. The notch moves around pretty much right up to the Nyquist point. And that too is going to change based on where reso sits. But the weird thing about the resonance here, this is not narrowing that notch at all. That notch is the same width regardless. Now in the filter I'm going to put out, this stuff is all going to be in comment. The filter that I put out, it'll be gain balanced, so that as you increase reso, amplitude jumps up. But this is not that. With this, you can see that this is a curve going down to its steepest point and then back up to another curve. It's not a flat roll-off at all. And then as we increase the resonance, what's happening, if this is set to notch, is that we're just taking off. Oh, and it's changing in frequency, same as before. This is changing in frequency, but then this time it's going down in frequency. That's interesting. More resonance, the more frequency goes down. Actually, I think that's consistent with what it was before. But you see the total amplitude here? Here, I'll boost it even more. See the total amplitude here? It's like it's sweeping the background up or down against what was the original resonance. And you can take it out completely, but all you've done is taken out the background. You've not steepened the angle of where that roll-off is. You've just changed the background noise around it. It shifts a little bit, but it's like this is giving us a steeper looking result. But you can see all that's really happening is we're sort of taking the background out of it. Now, given what this is, we can also do this. We could say here's a cutoff. We'll put it at, say, around 2K. And here we can start to see it. That's at minus 54. Now, if I drop it all the way down and then balance it again, to minus 54, if we have the gain of it compensated, it does act like we're widening or narrowing the resonance. But it's still really aiming at that one frequency very hard and not really doing anything else. And again, we start ramping up resonance and all we're really doing is taking out the background. Also, there's that funny quality of we get a sort of funny extra frequency in there. And then if we're doing it simply as a low pass, if you were doing a biquad filter, I could tell you what would happen out of this. This is not a steep roll-off, not by a long, long shot. As we increase resonance with a typical biquad, you're altering Q, meaning you are changing the speed of the roll-off as you increase that number. Q increases, and then the roll-off gets steeper and steeper, but at the cost of a frequency bump getting added to it. Watch this though. We bring in band. Actually, let's not even bring in band yet. We bring in reso. All that's doing is adding a very narrow resonant peak right where that cutoff is. The angle didn't change at all. At all. It's the same angle. We're just putting a kind of point on it. Not only that, let's put that back to somewhere. I had the wrong thing. Not only that, here's high pass. That's acting exactly the same. The angle's not changing in the least. It's just adding a resonant frequency that interacts with it. So it's just adding essentially a drone that is following frequency there. And by the same token, you can do band pass, and it kinda sorta looks like a band pass. But watch this. See how that's not really a very steep band pass. As we bring in reso, those angles aren't really changing at all. We're not making them any steeper. All we're doing is sort of crossfading into this drone note. Here's what we can expect to get out of a state variable filter. It's doing a filtery kind of thing, but the cutoffs of all of these filters are wildly restricted by how it works. So there's an interesting part of this, though. I'm looking at a bandpass filter, in which case it is doing, and see, we can do the resonance and stuff. We've got the steepest resonance here, and then it's rapidly falling off, and it's losing less and less the farther you go. This never becomes a straight line. A straight line would be like 6 dB per octave, 12 dB per octave. A biquad will give you that. This doesn't. This is not giving me a flat dB per octave roll-off. Low pass has a fairly similar behavior. That is, let's see, bring it up here. It's kind of, here's our resonant peak, and then it's slowly falling off. See how it's not really following the steepness, it's like getting shallower as it goes to its extremes. And I bet we're going to get something similar in high as well. Maybe not, maybe a little bit. Include band and everything is much shallower. So we can sweep it right up to extremely steep or down farther. And what's happening with this high pass, which is a little different from what the low pass does, is it's falling off, but then we're still not getting to the point where it falls off faster and faster. We just don't really have the steep cutoff point there. That's probably normal. I'm not surprised. This is about as much as we can get. It does have a pretty good amount of maximum cutoff there. That's not bad. So essentially, in looking at these things, it's telling me something about how all this interacts. We've got a capacity for resonance where it never really turns into a fixed roll-off. Instead, the roll-off starts becoming less and less effective as far as it goes. Bandpass, same story. We never end up seeing a linear roll-off. Instead, we have a predominance of that one frequency, and then it keeps falling off farther and farther the more it goes. One of the things I was doing in my experimenting, quit out of here for a moment, was inverting bandpass. So we could do that. And the other thing I was doing was scaling it according to Q. And we had all of that going on. I do believe what I'm seeing is... Well, the first thing I can do is this. And then I had a further hack on it, and we can experiment with that in a moment. I'm reconstructing what I did in a fit of hacking, but as a more normal version, and we'll see where this goes. So now what I've done, effect stacks, let's see, Toro, here we go, here's my noise. Is we have a resonant filter. And this is what it normally does. But what I did was add negative band rather than positive band. They're supposed to be added together, or indeed you're supposed to just not worry about that and pick only one or the other. Like here's band. It still works normally. But what I did was add the negative band to see what would happen. And I've never done this before, so now we're going to see what this does when you do it. It looks like I made it more shallow. Still works. Here's the low. Okay, this is interesting. So I can have a low pass this low, but then if I add band, the amplitude of it is changed, but also it has now become a shallower roll-off than it was. What I have done in the original version of this last week was do an anti-saturated signal. Happy Shadow, it looks like you've been watching all of my conversations with the fellow who wanted donut, because that's where this all came from. So let's increase reso and see what happens. Or before we do that, I'm experimenting with proportions. It looks like this comes in at the bottom and interacts with the other waveform there. Likewise, here's what this normally is. And I don't honestly hear any change when I bring in low. What if I have it higher up? Much higher up. Much higher up. Okay, there's negative band. If we bring in positive low, it's bringing in lows to fill in. So without the inverted sine business that I was doing, here's what we get. Now if I increase reso, this should be not increasing the steepness, because it kind of can't, unless maybe it does. We'll find out. Ah, okay. So here's the difference. If we have just low, we have the previous behavior, which is unchanged from a normal Toro filter, where it wants to go steeper and steeper, and it's making this sort of exponential curve looking thing, the point where it'll just ring. And it's the same with just band, But then if we have both, it feels a little like it's broadening. I'm not sure if it's that big of a change at this extremely high level. Although I will say, bringing in band, we bring in the highs again. Bringing in low, we make sure there's still lows. And then if we have all of them, that's relatively flat. But then again, reso means we get the notch if we allow that to be there. I wonder if there's an optimum band. If we're a band of exactly half, bearing in mind it's inverted, so that shouldn't be doing anything sensible at all. And sure enough, we've got some kind of weird behavior. We've got a really steep roll. That's interesting. I didn't expect that. So we have the high pass all the way up. The combination of these two things are making an interesting result. Looks like we have an optimum reso for this. So what's our optimum frequency? This is now a strange, extremely steep Nyquist filter. Didn't expect that. So now the question becomes, is it the same if band is not inverted? Because looky there, we've got a filter that is up at 20K. Let's see what it does at 44.1K. And it's like a solid 40-50 dB down by the time it hits Nyquist. That's interesting. That's a pretty strong result. Let's see whether we have the same thing at 44.1K. This is a louder noise too. What do we got? Oh, it doesn't do the same thing at all. But can it? Ah. There's still a place where it can. Okay, that's amusing. We can sweep up the resonance and then use the inverted band being added to make an interesting effect. That's kind of cool. That's again, it's 32 around 70. So that's an increasing roll-off down to about 30 dB down. Amusing. I'm not sure it's useful, but it's one way to set the filter. So then, back to 96, it's not stable. is what I just determined. It is not stable at different sample rates, but I saved it at 96K. This is the 96K. We're going to find out whether it is doing the same thing regardless of whether you invert mid or not. There's our lovely steep roll-off down to about 90 dB down. I just dialed it in until it was just about perfect. So it's very good at resisting Nyquist frequency noise. And then if out B is not negative after all, maybe we'll get a spike at Nyquist instead. This is very much just for my own curiosity at this stage, because I don't believe this part is actually useful. Just it's amusing to see what you can make the state variable filter do. So here's our magic setting. Do we have that same degree of roll-off? So if we do, that's a very interesting result, because we shouldn't. We really shouldn't. We don't. Yeah, so we have determined a situation, although now it looks like a shelf. We have determined a situation where if you set the band to negative and dial it in just right, you can make it start canceling out increasingly steeply at Nyquist. So the next thing to do, since we've managed that, we got our band, and we're going to do the same processing that we have on the sort of magic value that I did. And then we're going to see what that does interacting with like low but also high. Maybe there's a purpose to having high there. Because this ended up giving me some interesting sounding results. So the way I arrived at this in hacking away last stream day, the way I arrived at this one was flipping phase on things, seeing whether I could get anything weird to happen. And then when I heard that the flipping the phase caused reverb to come out of my sample audio a little bit more, I thought it would be interesting to put a distortion on what is actually the negative mid that I'm using. And what we've got here, we've got low, we've got high, and then when I turn this all up all the way, we'll get what I arrived at last stream. We're making the slope more shallow. So without band in there, band seems to be more shallow. Also, this might not be exactly what I had. And I'll tell you why. I have extra code in there. So let's do a little quick check. Here is what I had. So here we have low plus equals F times band. We have band plus equals F times Q times input sample. That's high. So it's the same as generating high and then having band plus equals F times what's in here. So that part, if we don't use high after this stage, we've got this and it's fine. Minus plus equals F times minus low minus Q times band. Yep, that's exactly the same as it was before. And then we have input sample is low times negative sign. No, I've done a silly thing. I made a silly mistake. Don't mind me. Here's what we want to do. I put the sign in negative band in the wrong place, but wait, there's more, because I had a compensation in there in order to get it to sound good. So what it's doing up here is going negative sign band times 1 minus Q. So I'd better incorporate that as well while I'm at it. And then it's times equals out B, which if I turn it up all the way is going to be about the same either way. So I need to include this. I had this to get to where I was at. There, now that should be what I made. Because I was hacking away, making it work, and trying stuff that seemed to make sense. And sign negative band times that means it's going to hit the sign at different levels. I want to see what I got when measured against noise. Then we can play with it again on actual audio. Not that noise isn't actual audio, but this is about testing. Here we go. Here's the normal kind. Here's Reso. Add all of the band to replicate what my previous one was. Now if I change Reso, it's also altering the amount of this that's combined. So it's a better roll off here. The amount of extreme highs that are showing up are sitting at about the same rather than continuing to increase. And then they start to drop just as you start getting into very extreme resonance. So one thing I will say for this it is looking as if we hit this maximum amount, because we've actually got it set up to where it's dropping in volume as we do this. And I believe when I do this, I've got it at maximum saturation as well. Meaning if I pull back the amount of Reso, the gain of this will go up just a hair. Yep. We're saturating that degree of band, whereas we're not saturating it when it's low. So when we combine the two, our maximum feedback point appears to be not that boosted, although in the original one that I'd be putting out as a filter, I've got like gain compensation, which will make this go louder, which will work nicely if we have any saturation after that in the chain. But what we're seeing here is a little bit like we've got about the same volume point, but then as we bring band in, it's bringing some of the other stuff up. It's making it even a little bit more shallow. That's probably why I was hearing reverb a little more easily. Is we're bringing up so there's going to be a stage at which low gets replaced by this inverted band, and I'm curious as to what's going on there and whether I can maybe make it sit in different places. Like without any band, we have a slightly steeper roll-off. As we start bringing it in, that high frequency stuff comes from like under 100 dB down to a maximum of about 70 dB down. There's not much we can do to make it really go as far down as it would if it was only the low-pass filter. But remember, this is an inverted signal being combined with low. It's saturated, so there's distortion in there, but there is also an inversion. I'm trying to hear if it's doing anything amusing at totally high reso. Or we can just do this and get a ghostly drone and see if we can dial in making it sound like your classic Moog analog filter drone. Because if we have this drone, it sounds okay, but it sounds a little bit synthetic. And then when we start bringing in band, we got a little more character in here. So the question is there a happy medium? Also, the other question is it time to throw another log on the fire? And the answer would be, yeah, it's time to throw another log on the fire. That seems within my capabilities. Let's do that thing. We're a bit past going and making other cups of coffee, but all in all, this is a decent sort of exploration day. That'll hold it for a while. Back to listening to ghostly winds. We'll turn it way the heck up and hope nothing drastic happens in the audio that'll blow my speakers. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. Yeah, so I'm calling this doesn't sound that amazing.